Democrats lose their mind about Brett Kavanaugh's nomination, Bob Woodward's book launches, and Paul Krugman says Republicans are here to steal your health care. Oh, happy day. I'm Ben Shapiro. This is the Ben Shapiro Show. Today, this very tumbler will be filled endlessly with the tears of all of the people at the Senate Judiciary Committee hearing. It is fully insane over there, where all the women have been reduced to the status of menial slaves under President Pence, and Justice Kavanaugh has forced them all into the back alleys for their abortions. We'll talk about all of those things. The second day of the Brett Kavanaugh hearings is upon us. Brett Kavanaugh, of course, is President Trump's nominee to replace Justice Kennedy. Yesterday, I mistakenly said he was going to replace Scalia, but that, of course, was Justice Gorsuch. He is there to replace Justice Kennedy, and the left is going nuts over this because, oh my God, an establishment Republican with the most establishment of credentials is going to sit on the Supreme Court, and there's nothing they can do to stop it. And there's nothing they can do to stop it because Harry Reid, back in 2013, like an idiot, utilized the nuclear option in order to get through a bunch of judicial nominees by President Obama over the filibuster. So now it only requires 51 votes to put somebody on a federal court. Well, the Republicans have those 51 votes. They will be using them for Brett Kavanaugh. He will indeed sit on the nation's highest court. Now, what's hilarious about all of this is the levels of panic to which the left have been rising in the last couple of days are fully crazy. I mean, fully crazy. And we'll show you some of that panic in just a second. But Brett Kavanaugh is sitting there answering questions like, what do you think about Roe v. Wade? And he's saying it's precedent. And then he's asked about Planned Parenthood versus Casey. And he says it's precedent on a precedent. This does not sound like a dude who's going to overturn Roe v. Wade. This was always my criticism of Judge Brett Kavanaugh. I didn't think that he was the most right-leaning person that the Republicans could have picked, the most originalist person Republicans could have picked. I think he'll be a pretty good judge. I think he'll be a pretty good justice. I don't think that he's going to be Thomas or Scalia. I'm not sure that he's a solid vote to overrule Roe v. Wade. But it doesn't matter what he says at this point because the Democrats have basically already made up their mind, and judicial hearings are useless because we now have something called the Ginsburg rule, which has been in place for some 30 years. Basically, you can't expect a judge to answer questions about how they will decide in an upcoming case or even what they really think of past precedent. Instead, they just say it's precedent, which is a legal description of the state of the law. Roe is precedent, but precedent is not binding on the Supreme Court because the Supreme Court can simply overrule precedent anytime that it wants. So all of this is to say that these judicial hearings are a complete waste of time. They're utter nonsense. They're a way for the senators to grandstand and apparently for them to bring in all of their crazy friends to grandstand as well. The hearings were interrupted in the first 40 minutes 44 times yesterday by various Democrats shouting out interruptions. Also, there are a bunch of people who decided to shout at Brett Kavanaugh in the room. People like Piper Parabo, who's not been relevant since Coyote Ugly. She got arrested yesterday in the worst performance, ironically, since Coyote Ugly. She got arrested yesterday. Linda Sarsour of the Women's March was also arrested in the room. She was dragged out, kicking and screaming, and you know she's a delight in every possible way. So all of these radicals in the room getting dragged away. It's just terrific. It's just terrific. Here's some video of the protesters screaming because that was delightful.
We're not in executive session.
And what Chairman Leahy did during Justice Kagan's, this is another example of confidential documents. Weren't really interested in seeing them in the first place.
So here's the rule I think they should apply. I think the rule they should apply here is that if you invited anybody in who disrupts the hearing, you don't get to invite anybody in anymore. If you are one of the Democratic senators and you allowed Code Pink to come in, you allowed Linda Sarsour to come in, then she got herself arrested because she's adult, then you don't get to invite anybody anymore because that's not what these hearings are for. If you want to protest, there's plenty of space outside for you to protest. Your protest will be useless because this is a democratic process, not a protesting and shouting process. But screaming and whining are the way that the Democrats are dealing with the fact that they are not going to be able to get Merrick Garland on the court to replace a Republican appointee like Justice Kennedy. Here is video of Linda Sarsour getting arrested yesterday. She, again, is a delight. I'll catch you later, Linda. Okay, if you can understand what they're saying, then you have better hearing than I do. All I hear is the shrieking of some sort of primeval creature in the middle of a hearing room. Now, these are humans. I'm not calling her an animal. All I'm saying is that shrieking is inaudible. There is no way for you to tell what she is saying because she is shrieking like a banshee at the people in the room. You're right. Everybody on that panel, Orrin Hatch is going, you know what? I've changed my vote because Linda Sarsour is shrieking at me. People in the middle of the country, they're thinking, yes, disaster, thy name be Brett Kavanaugh. moderates in the middle of the country, independents in the middle of the country, they are thinking the apocalypse is upon us. So now we've been told by the Democrats that women and trans folks will die because of Brett Kavanaugh. Everybody was going to die because of net neutrality. Everybody already died because of the tax cuts. I mean, how many times can people die already? It's wild. It's pretty amazing stuff. All of this should also remind you, that when we get all of this nonsense from the left and from some members of the right about civility in our politics, Trump being the beginning and end of civility in our politics, he's the one who ruined civility. Yeah, sure. Yeah, right. It's all about Trump. This is what bugged me about the McCain funeral, where you had George W. Bush and Barack Obama standing up there, kind of creating this mythologized past where everybody sort of got along. And I was talking with a friend this morning about what bothered me about that idea so much. And what bothered me about the idea is that there are those of us who actually believe that politics matter. And all these politicians prey on us. Because what they do is they say, you're right, politics do matter. And so you got Joe Biden on the left saying, we'll put you all back in chains. And folks on the right saying, this will be the end of the country unless we do something. It's apocalyptic rhetoric from people on both sides of the aisle because they're saying, yes, you are right, politics do matter. And then, as soon as somebody comes along and says, you're right, politics matter, so we're going to fight this like a war. You've been using this apocalyptic rhetoric. This is going to be a political war. We're going to fight this like a war. Then they say, whoa, hold on. We didn't want to do that. Right? So they've been basically doing this WWE routine for a very long time, where you have every major politician from both parties speaking like WWE wrestlers, but then telling people that they ought to take it seriously, that it's not fake, that in reality these issues actually matter. And then when the people take those issues seriously, and then when they elect a guy who is not a politician who takes the thing seriously, like Trump actually takes the personal conflict seriously, regardless of what you think of the guy, then they say, well, no, he didn't understand that this was all part of the game. He didn't understand. He missed it. He didn't understand it was all part of the game. There's a movie with Robert De Niro called The Fan a long time ago about this kind of, it's about a guy who is a fan of a baseball team, and his baseball team is about to go to the World Series. I think this is how the plot works. And Robert De Niro is a fan of the baseball team, and he is so enamored with his team's chances of making the World Series that he goes and he kidnaps the opposing star on the other baseball team. And everybody in the world is like, well, why would you possibly do that? And he's like, well, because I want my team to win. Because he took the conflict too seriously. I feel like that's sort of what we've done with our politics a little bit, which is we now root for the opposing teams. The difference being there are actual consequences to which team wins or loses. And so you got the left claiming that the end of the world is nigh and the right claiming the end of the world is nigh. And then the minute that somebody like Trump comes along and says, okay, fine, if the end of the world is nigh, let's treat this like the brawl that it is. Then all of a sudden people on both sides of the aisle, they go, whoa, wait up a second. We didn't really mean that stuff. And it's like, well, if you didn't mean it, then why did you say it? I agree the end of the world is not nigh. I agree that we're not at the end of the country. I agree we're not on the verge of civil war. I think there are serious divisions about the future of the country. But I think that most Americans are not engaged in those serious divisions. I think that's an intellectual superstructure that really cares deeply about those divisions. I think most Americans are just going about their daily business, making basic assumptions about American life that reflect the essential founding values of the country. But I think there is this intellectual upper class where they have these battles and they know that it's kabuki theater, and then in the back room they get a drink together, but they don't let anyone else in on the secret that it's kabuki theater. In reality, the actual kabuki theater should be them getting along, and they should be bashing each other. Again, I find all of this really tiresome. So what politics really does look like in the country, the way people feel right now is like Linda Sarsour. The way people feel in the country is like Donald Trump. They feel like that the wrestling is real. That's what they feel like. Because you know what? When it comes to the consequences, the wrestling actually is real. And the fact that our politicians didn't take it as real for so long and preyed upon that impression to create enthusiasm for their mission, while all the time knowing that they were just exaggerating the case, that's what's created. Everybody bought into their vision. Everybody bought into the wrestling is real meme. And now the wrestling is real. Once everybody believes the wrestling is real, then they're going to start brawling. And that's basically where we are right now, down to the point where everyone has now become delusional. The left is fully delusional about these Kavanaugh hearings. And when I say delusional, there were two stories that started making the rounds yesterday, both of which are completely insane. So story number one is there is a woman named Zina Bash. Zina Bash is a half Mexican, half Jewish White House staffer. And she is married to a U.S. attorney, I believe. And Zina Bash was sitting behind Brett Kavanaugh during these hearings. And the left began claiming that she was making a white power symbol behind Brett Kavanaugh. I kid you not, this thing within a couple of hours, this video of Zina Bash, who is legitimately just putting her hand on her arm. They're saying she's making a covert white power symbol for no reason, just because that's her sitting racism or something. Like they've still not explained why exactly, even if she were a white supremacist, which she is not, she's again a half Mexican, half Jewish person, why exactly her paternal grandparents survived the Holocaust? Like why exactly she would be making a white power symbol behind Brett Kavanaugh is beyond me. But they claim that she was legitimately making a white power symbol behind Brett Kavanaugh. And there were 1,000 tweets about this. Right? The left began tweeting about this incessantly. Major blue checkmark figures on the left began tweeting about all of this. It's just insane. The ACLU tweeted out, spread the word. It's hashtag not okay. Neo-Nazis are using the okay hand gesture to communicate a hateful message. When using the gesture, the fingers form the letters W and P, which stand for white power. Do not use this hand gesture. It's not okay. Okay, Barack Obama has used this hand gesture. You see what I'm doing right now? This is not a white power symbol. I've been using the hand gesture for okay for my entire life, as have you, as have your parents, because that's not a thing. In fact, the ADL recognized this is not a thing, the Anti-Defamation League. Okay, this is what they wrote back in September 2018. They updated it yesterday. Has the simple thumb and forefinger okay hand gesture become a common white supremacist hand signal? Not quite, but it has become a popular gesture used by people across several segments of the right and far right, including some actual white supremacists who generally use it to trigger reactions or what they would describe as trolling the libs. This is thanks to a 2017 hoax campaign started by members of the notorious website 4chan that has since taken on a life of its own. I'm going to explain a little bit more about this in just